Hello and welcome to the Improving Student Experience Across the Faculties podcast episode. So here we are hosting today's episode as your SU Education Officers. I'm Gabrielle, the Exec Officer for FBMH.
I'm Katie, the Faculty of Humanities Officer.
And I'm Nahid, the SU FSC Officer.
Yeah. We are also joined by our Vice Deans of the Faculties, if you want to introduce yourselves.
I'm Fiona, I'm Vice Dean for Teaching and Learning Students in the Faculty of Humanities.
I'm Jen, I'm Vice Dean for Teaching and Learning Students in BMH.
I'm Peter, I'm the Vice Dean for Teaching, Learning and Students in Science and Engineering.
Very nice. During today's Open Meeting podcast, we'll be answering the questions submitted by students, and we also added some more questions of our own. We try to go through as many questions as possible. So let's start with the first question. What do you think is the biggest difference between all three faculties? And what do you think works the same way in the three faculties?
So I think one of the biggest differences between the three faculties is professional accreditation. So in humanities, we have a few programs that are professionally accredited, but not all that many. And that makes some differences in terms of the requirements of the external bodies that we don't necessarily have in humanities. And I think that one of the other biggest differences from a humanities perspective is the number of contact hours. We require a lot more independent study of students rather than sitting in lectures or labs or whatever else.
Yeah, no, I think the regulation one's a big one, and location-wise as well. So for BMH, lots of our students aren't on campus that often. So they're medical, dental, nursing students, so they are on clinical placements around the city. They're not often here on the campus, so it's quite difficult to look at similar ways of how we engage our students because they're not all located in the same way. I think course duration is quite different as well. So we have lots of 4-year, 5-year programs, which our faculties are more similar in that sense, but 3-year undergraduate modular programs, we don't have that many of them. So I think course duration, structure, they're some of the biggest differences, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a huge amount of laboratory space, which you need for a lot of the technical programs we run. And if you imagine, one of our challenges is you may only have 3 or 4 pieces of a particular piece of kit, and you've got to cycle 400 students through it. So it gives real challenges in timetabling. You talk about differences. Since we opened the new engineering building and you see the 3 students of the 3 faculties mixing, you suddenly realise there's a lot more in common in terms of how students study, how they want to work, etc. But I'd say labs is the big thing and professional accreditation.
Yeah. And when you hit on there about similarities, I think it's what works the same across is that students want to be heard, they want to be valued, they want to be us to be transparent with them. So the way we communicate is, a really good example of something that's quite similar. So, and we all commit across the 3 faculties to, we want every student to have a brilliant experience, regardless of where they're studying, what they're studying, how they're studying. And I think that's a really big similarity that, we just want to work with students in collaboration. And as you said, when you see students working together, it's showcasing that there are more similarities probably than there are differences.
Sure. I think obviously what you've just said is, I think you've hit the nail on the head, because obviously we're all from 3 different faculties, but we're all working towards the same things. So we're on to your second question now. So a lot of people watching this probably won't know what your role is. So can you just give kind of a brief overview of what your roles are as Vice Deans?
I think it'd be quicker to tell you what it is. No, it's funny because just before Christmas, I had reason to actually look at my job description and realise there's very little on it that's actually I'm doing. It's all the other things. I mean, from my point of view, think of it as you coordinate all aspects of student activity in your faculty. And that can be as broad as you can imagine. I mean, the other week I'm handing out what's a lovely idea, scholarships to students. Lovely thing, scholarship ceremony. And then you go all the way through to trying to solve out a timetabling problem. Jen and I were working on
last week.
The other day to schedule exams. So there's very little, I think, that's not in it. And I think what's really important about the roles is you do need a coordination person that looks after the whole faculty and joins it up. And then in light of what we're saying about students working together, you've now got 3 vice deans who meet almost weekly to join everything up at the university level.
That's a really good summary.
Thank you.
Good job.
When you reviewed that, was there anything about answering 100 questions from Nahid.
Every day.
I think there was a limit of 3, wasn't there? No, the dean was joking. There should be a line in there, and looking after the dean.
Yeah.
That's actually, I was just about to say, so kind of what is the difference then between the dean role and the vice dean role? How do they work together, and what's the difference?
So I'm also Deputy Dean of the Faculty of Humanities. So the difference, I suppose, really is that the Vice Dean role is very much focused on every aspect of student experience, from admissions right through to graduation, employability, right to the end. The Dean role is much more about the faculty as a whole. So it's overseeing research, social responsibility, if there are HR issues, that it's a much bigger, broader picture, looking after the budget of the faculty and so on. So one role is very much focused on teaching, learning the students, and the other role is focused on just running the faculty as a whole.
Nice.
Across all faculties, we have different vice dean roles. So we'll have a vice dean of teaching and learning, which is what we do, vice deans of research, social responsibility, so that as a team we work together to connect all those different pieces, because what we do in teaching and learning has impact in social responsibility and vice versa. So everything that we do in teaching and learning, we have to ensure connects with everything else. So I think we're the voices of teaching and learning at the faculty level, and making sure that it's embedded across everything that we do within the faculty as well.
Nice.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yes, I have the third question. So what are the biggest challenges the faculties face when trying to improve the student experience, and how can students help?
I like that one.
I would say what it is in FSE. So the single biggest challenge for us is assessment and feedback. And it's been around for many years. It's not a new thing. And we put in place initiatives, but even now it is still the single thing brought forward through the student voice committees to us. Comes in 2 flavours. One is timeliness of feedback, getting that feedback to students at a point when it's actionable by them. And to be honest, I think sometimes what we are not good at doing is telling students when a piece of feedback becomes actionable. So in my own coursework, the students won't get feedback until week 11. But that's because they didn't do the labs till week 8 and 9. But then it's no point in me saying that's actionable this semester. It's actionable in the following semester. And then the other thing is around the nature of feedback. Students talk about personalised feedback. And I think we've got to find far smarter ways of doing that at scale. Because if you've got a class of 500 and you've got 15 working days to return the feedback, it's really hard. And I think we may come on to this later, AI could be a big plus here to help us support students around the quality of feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in humanities, I would say that our biggest challenge is consistency, so that we have some areas of really good practice and then we have some areas that are not so good. So I think the key thing for us in terms of how students can help us is to tell us about some of those things. We tend to focus, I think, a little bit when we do student feedback on what's going wrong. And absolutely, we need to know what's going wrong and therefore making sure that we can solve it. But we also need to know what's going right so that we can share that practice. And I think that's one of the roles of the vice deans as well, is to share good practice across the 3 faculties and across all the different schools.
Awesome.
Nice. I would say a combination. So I think we've got challenges around communication as well, because we do a lot of initiatives, for example, that don't always reach students or don't come across in a way that seems relatable or accessible. So I think that authenticity of what we do needs to be authentic to students. So, whether it's how we communicate with you, whether it's, via written medium, video, social media, whatever it is, we need to hear what's the best way for us to communicate with students. And I think that's a really good way that students can help us in terms of, we know you've got a lot going on. We know lives are happening, and it's how best can we support you to engage with all of that. So how best can we communicate with you, I think, would be a really helpful way for students to be involved. And I think students who value the experience are ones that feel they've co-created their experience. So they've been a authentic voice in designing what their university education looks like. And to do that, we need to work in complete partnership from day one, not us design something and then ask you about it later. We have to work completely in partnership on everything that we do. Otherwise, you're not going to see the value of it.
Just touch a bit further on scale, if I may, because I think we're really good at having, as Fiona says, pockets of absolute excellence. I mean, I can think of one lecturer who, gets great feedback from the students. His class size is 25. And it really is very personalised feedback. But how do you take that great work and scale it up to someone who's got a class of 450?
Yeah.
And that's something I don't think we always do. We have some great initiatives, but they don't always scale.
Yeah.
And so I think we've got to have a real think and sit down with students and work out how to do things at scale.
And how is that authentic at scale? Because a classroom of 25 versus a classroom of 400, how do you find that personalisation just within the sheer volume of the scale? So it's not just about some of the initiatives, it's initiatives end to end. So we can give you really personalised feedback, but if you don't feel part of the teaching, you don't feel part of the culture, how much impact is that going to have? So I think we need to see that journey through from end to end and really understand what is it like to be in a class of that size versus a class of 3.
Yeah.
So it's finding those, as you say, those really good examples and then looking as a collective of how we can scale some of those things up to have impact for lots of students rather than a small few.
Something else that students are mentioning is that they couldn't engage with other activities because of the workload. What do you suggest they can do to balance that?
Well, it's a very personal view. I think we've got a lot more work to do on study budgets myself. When you're talking 24, 26 contact hours a week, and then your coursework on top, and then possibly your project, I think there's much more we could do with students around planning time and actually helping them develop a study budget. Because I think when you've got the study budget, then you work out what other time you may have. But there will be courses, and there's certainly courses in engineering and science where just the sheer pressure of activity to meet accreditation, it puts a lot of hours in the diary. So I can't pretend there's lots of hours going free. That wouldn't be fair of me to say. But I think we could do a lot more around study budgets.
Yeah, and I think what we design needs to be inclusive from the get-go. So I think the issues with some optional activities or scenarios that students can engage with, those that are working, those that are commuting, for example, might not get the same opportunities to engage with them. So I think we need to really focus on the design so that it's inclusive for everybody or not inclusive for certain groups. I think if we can coordinate with, study budgets, what opportunities students have got, time management, I mean, that's something that we're all still learning. I mean, it's an academic way of life. So I think if we can work, open and transparently on that we know there's a lot to do, and particularly when it's regulatory requirements. However, what can we do to enable you the affordance of all these great opportunities in a way that is flexible and suits your needs?
I think in lots of ways the situation in humanities is very different because the contact hours are so much lower. So most students in humanities probably have 9 or 10 hours a week. So the challenge then becomes about how do you manage the rest of your time when effectively you've got a reading list that's quite long, and it's up to you to go and sit in the library or to read that stuff in your own time. So I think that, I agree with Peter. I think study budgets are one of the things that we need to think about, and about how we might support students to sort of carve out certain periods of time when they might read, or make sure that they're aware about all the different kinds of opportunities that are out there. Often, I think in humanities, the students that are most successful are the ones that are working and studying and everything else, because their day is a little bit more structured, and the sort of freedom of having maybe a day clear of teaching. It's easy to kind of just have that as another day of the weekend, isn't it? So I think we've got different sorts of challenges in humanities, but it is something that we're very aware of and something that we're working on for next year.
Very good point. So the next question is, how will the university prioritize the long-term future of students, like their careers, PhD, and how is going forward?
So from a humanities perspective, one of the things that we're doing at the moment is we're looking at kind of refreshing our programmes and just looking at what we're doing. We're looking at with the career service involvement in that. So they're actually helping us to look at our programmes and think about what we're including. What, again, can sometimes be a bit more of a challenge in humanities. If you go outside of the business school and outside of subjects like law, there isn't necessarily a very obvious career path. And actually a lot of humanities students go into business related occupations. So we're actually in a lot of cases trying to develop quite generic kinds of skills. I was having a conversation the other day about how might we embed commercial awareness into a history degree, for example. What could we do something with an assessment task that was innovative and creative, but got students to think in that different sort of way? So I think there's two things that we need to do. One is to make sure that we're aware about what kinds of skills employers are looking for, and we're working with employer panels to do that and developing that aspect of it. And the other thing is thinking about how we make sure that we develop those skills in students and then talk to students about those skills, because sometimes you've done an assessment task which we think has developed a certain set of skills, but we forgot to tell you what those skills were. So we need to do that as well. And that will be part of academic advising.
Yeah, I think for us in our faculties that it's slightly different in that you tend to have a career path dependent on what course you're doing. So I think in BMH that's kind of I would say 80-20, depending on what you're studying. But then it's how do we support you to transition into that world of work? So we know that your education doesn't end when you leave us, and we don't want it to. We want you to feel that, you know, there's the opportunities to come and engage back with the university, but also to be ready for that world of work with those kind of professional skills that enable you to thrive. And it doesn't matter what job that is, it's how do we prepare you to thrive in that world of work. And as Fiona said, figuring out from an employability perspective what are the skills that are there, and we try and keep very up to date with that because we know that there's rapid changes within the world. So AI, for example, we know employers are wanting different skill sets and the ways or formats of working. So it's not always in an office 9 to 5 now. The variety in terms of how employers are wanting people to engage, we need to ensure that you're prepared to enter into that world. And the best way for us to do that is to work with you and work with employers. So it's not us assuming that we know what you're going to go into. So it's how do we best learn from our graduates, from our alumni, for those that are going to employ our students, of what is it that we're looking for and how best do we support you to do that? Because like I said, we can design things that we're like, you know, this really makes a great impact in terms of learning this professional skill, for example. But if we're not transparent and we don't explain that, it's really hard for students to feel ownership of it and to then transfer it into another environment, like in the workplace, for example. I think it's also important to see how you can personalise your career portfolio. So for nurses, medics, example, you will go into a professional job, but do you want to be a research nurse? Do you want to be entrepreneurial? Do you want to engage in leadership? So is there a way of you can personalise your preferences at university to give you that step ahead in terms of your career portfolio? But for us, it's giving them the options to engage in some of those different activities. Try it out. You might decide you actually hate leadership when you get involved in the practice of it in reality. So us giving you the variety and the opportunities to try it out a little bit as well.
I like the idea that we knew where we were going.
Yeah.
I was just thinking at age 16, did I think Vice Dean? No, I did not.
I did.
At age 46, I didn't think Vice Dean. I think the things also, I mean, we've got one of the best career services in the country, full stop. And it's easy to forget that. And actually, they are very, very good at what they do.
Yeah.
So proactive, they come out to us
and
looking for those initiatives. Certainly in science and engineering, we've got to give a lot of attention to the softer skills as well. Because you could think it is going to be my science degree, my engineering degree. Yeah. Yes, that will make a huge difference. But then there's going to be other candidates. And so then it'll come down to typically your ability to communicate. And we need to equip our students to better communicate through a variety of media. Yeah. The other thing is, and certainly helps in science and engineering, is to bring industry and students together whilst at university. And that may be through a piece of project work, it may be through a lecture series or whatever. That just allows you to put something on your CV, and it may be a year in industry. Yeah. I mean, I had a student who, and he wouldn't mind me saying this, he got a 2-2 degree, but he won out at interview over all other candidates because of a year in industry, and he could show that he could actually be one of these people that could just carry on learning through the career. It was just interesting how that step came from a period in industry.
I think one of the really critical skills that we're sometimes not great at articulating that a lot of students in Manchester have is resilience. And I think when we talk about employability, we sometimes have this quite sort of linear view that you're going to go into a job and you're going to kind of stay there. And actually, that isn't the reality of most graduates these days. They're going to change jobs. And we've only got to think of, the change in the world since COVID, the emergence of AI, how we need to all be able to kind of develop new sets of skills, new ways of thinking about things. So I think that's an important part as well. It's not even the obvious skills like presentation skills or, some of those kind of team working skills that we often talk about. It's the broader set of skills as well that students get. That's important.
Yeah. I do think what you said earlier was really good about how students aren't the best at communicating the skills that they get from their degree. And I know that the career service does help with that as well. I know I've used them a lot since I graduated, and they are great.
Yeah, they do like a skills audit.
Yeah, they do. I'm always getting emails from them.
Yeah.
And I think it's showing those stories though.
Yeah.
So for students are more likely to see value in your story of using the career service than me telling them what the career service can do. So I think it's how do we use our alumni and our graduates as a great one here. Of, how do we, the experience that you've had, and how do you translate your skills? And it's done in a very different way from what you did your degree in terms of coming into here. So I think we need to do more on that in terms of closing that feedback loop a bit more and having those authentic stories to tell.
Definitely.
A question one of my students was asked this year at interview. What do you think you'll learn in the first year of working with us? And it was and they told him afterwards, it was just to see, do you think university is the end of your learning or the start of your learning?
Yeah.
And they just want to see, because you say AI, but most of electronics in which I work, it's moving on like a 6-month cycle.
Yeah.
And someone who goes, well, I've done all my learning at university, that's not the mindset they're looking for. So I think helping students develop that sort of lifelong learning mentality that we will keep learning, maybe change careers, is really important.
Yeah, sure.
As for the skills, I think we have LinkedIn Learning as well now. If I'm not mistaken, they can do some courses in their own time, and then it gives them a certificate. So that's also a really good pathway for them.
And a move to digital badging as well. I think that'll become so that we will, we're doing this move to Canvas, as you know, as the central learning environment. And they have recently, as a company, bought one of the biggest digital badging services. Yeah, we were the same meeting, weren't we? She thought you remembered this.
Keep saying wow.
Oh, we do mind reading in episode. But that will be, I think, become so important. I could imagine a time when it won't just be the degree. An prospective employer will look down, what skills has this person got and what is the evidence for those skills? And you have like a digital portfolio. I'll stop now.
No, it's all right. Right, so we're on to the next question now. So, as we know, one of the biggest challenges at university is getting students engaged and getting them engaged with not only their learning, but things outside of their learning as well. So, what do you think, what key steps are you taking as different faculties, obviously, but to get more students engaged? And, sorry, I'm going to stop there.
I think I can talk from a BMH and then more generally about some of the activities that we're doing as a collective, but I think co-design from the outset is really important. So we're not just assuming that we know what students want. I think we have to proactively engage, and Gabrielle knows this because I drag her along to many an engagement activity, but I think it's being visible and transparent to our students that, we want to work with you. We want to not just develop something that we hope you will benefit from, but giving students the real opportunity to engage with us and talk to us and tell us what they want and what they need. So as I talked earlier on, we've got a lot of students who aren't on campus. So traditionally we would do sessions where it would be, in a lecture theatre here and come and have a chat with us. But we know that isn't really supportive of their lifestyle, where they're working. So we're going out to them more. So we've nicknamed it BMH on tour. So I want a minibus, but we're not allowed one yet. So when they're on placement in Preston or in Wythenshawe or in Salford, we're going out to them in, part of teaching sessions where they're all going to be together. It's already scheduled. And just doing a drop-in. There doesn't have to be a theme. There doesn't have to be something that we specifically want to discuss or be reactive to. I think it's just building up that trust of, you can talk to us, you can share what's working in a good way, you can tell us what isn't working, and we need to showcase that we do something with that. I think one of the biggest issues is when students give feedback and there's that lag time and you don't know what's happened with that feedback, or you don't see any changes as a result of it. So we need to close that feedback loop a lot better. So we do videos in terms of, this is what we've done with your feedback and this is how we've enacted it, or we can explain why we can't do it. And that's particularly an issue for like regulated programs, for example, of what are the parameters in our way, for example. So I think it's just being really transparent and authentic with what we want to do, and that we actually do want to work with students and not just design something and hope you benefit and then shocked when you don't. So I think we have to be really directing that conversation and giving students realistic opportunities to engage with us.
I think that question of opportunity is a really important one as well. So, given the conversation we've just had, we've said, you need to be a lifelong learner. You need to see university as the start, not the end. You need to be doing all these things outside of your studies, doing LinkedIn learning and everything else. And then you're having to work and pay off a loan and everything else. It can become a bit kind of overpowering, I think, all of those things. So I think actually what we want to do is empower students to identify what they want to do, what really kind of gets them up in the morning, and making sure that we're embedding some of those things into their degree, so that their degree is the thing that gets them up in the morning, and they will then have the kinds of skills that they need for a job. So I think it's a transition period, I think, in the way that universities run. And it's really important that we don't see it as just you've got to do more and more and more. There'll be a lot of students who'll be finishing their degree thinking, oh, thank God that's over, and I now never want to learn again. And we're kind of saying that's not the answer. So we've got to think about that as well.
And you're right, it's not just about knowing things anymore, is it? So we don't just want you to be graduates who know loads of facts. It's about how do we bring some of those things about, engaging in that workplace lifelong learning to be in your degree, not something that you learn on the side. So we have to really embed it. And I think that's what's nice about the changes in higher education now. It's not just you learn something, you do an exam and you're finished. It's about more of the skills focused and competencies to prepare you for that next step, whether it be further study or employment. But I think design is key, isn't it? That we actually have to put it in the degree as opposed to hoping you learn it throughout.
And making the most of it.
It's been a real transition. There was a time when the recollection of facts was the thing, wasn't it? Could I remember this structural property of steel? Actually, no, the interesting thing now, it is interesting. You watch three people glaze over there. Two people on this side, actually.
So interesting.
Thank you.
I think this was really engaged with that one.
I was going to talk about communication, but clearly I'm fine. But it's now how we use information. The value system won't be can you recall something. It'll be let's assume you will have access to information sources. That won't be the difficulty. The difficulty is going to be that you've got an overwhelm of information and you've got to be critical users of it. And that is really hard. So trying to move our assessments to that more authentic mode, which will reflect what you do in industry, that is real partnership work with students, because I think they've got to come with us on that journey. Just on I think we're really good, well, speak for FSC, at getting the student voice in.
We agree.
Watch this. I'm back on steel in a minute. No, I think we're really good at hearing the student voice. We're still not good at the other half of the cycle. And I think this is where there's really got to be partnership working with students, which is what is the right way to tell students what we're doing or why we can't do a thing. So, for example, in FSE, there is a website which lists all the actions from all the student voice committees, their status, where they're up to. How many students have actually accessed that? From the logs, I think we're in tens. And so it may be a good thing, it may be an absolutely fine tracker, but the students don't have sight into it or not choosing to look at it. So I think there's a big piece of work around what's the right way to show students what we're doing and then close that loop out. We're certainly not getting it right at the moment.
And like we touched on earlier, it's how do we best communicate with it? So how do students want to hear about that? Is it in themes? Is it in, a long list that they can choose to read and then pick? And I think if you got a group of students together, they would all say something different in terms of there isn't a one size fits all in terms of how best we share that. So I think we need to work on how do we do it in the most effective way that you can dip in and dip out. And you might one day want to watch a TikTok feed. You might one day want to see an Instagram meal, or you might want meal. Instagram.
So I was going to say, you're inventing today.
Well, clearly I was watching Instagram recipes. Or you might want to see a reel, actual reel, or you might want to read a document. And I think we need to be flexible in terms of how we allow students to engage with that, and not forcing them to engage in a specific way or using a system in a specific way. So I think we need to look at that design element of exactly how we communicate. And that's, students can only tell us that. We can't figure that out without you telling us.
Or use ChatGPT as one student's done. They've put the whole of that tracker into ChatGPT and say, tell me the top 5 things that have changed.
That's so good.
Clever.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think as well, like, it's that thing of, even though there are only 10 people that are looking at that, that might be 10 people who will say, I feel like my voice is heard at a course level in the NSS. And even though it might seem like it's a little difference, that is 10 students who might feel more heard, I guess.
10 reps. If it's 10 reps and then go out and
Disseminate it widely.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well, we changed the question order up, so this should be fun. So most academics are researchers and have little to no industry experience, leading to theory-heavy teaching. What can we do to support students with more industry experience?
Question.
I'm going to slightly challenge there, if I may.
Ooh.
Because I think they are researchers. But if I look at pretty well everyone in engineering, if they've sought a grant from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, they will now almost certainly have to have an industry partner. So, for example, the main research council in the UK that covers science and engineering, one of the critical parts of your application for funding is to show impact and benefit to UK PLC and to humanity more generally. So I'd probably say I agree they're researchers. Some of them may not have themselves been in industry before coming to university. But those links into industry and to the benefit of society now are far stronger than ever before. You just wouldn't get a research grant. Even in some of the purest areas that are looking, I mean, if you look at something like mathematics and statistics, there's so much area of applicability of that. So I can see where the question's coming from. And I think that for me comes back to us doing more industry relevant work with students in FSC. So for example, project work, etc. But I think I'd probably say many academics are far more grounded in industrial relevance than ever before.
I think we talked about the change in higher education. I think that's something that has shifted quite a lot, hasn't it, in terms of the relevancy of the work that's being done, whether it's an individual research project or teaching information that aligns to that real world context. So it's great to know, but it's what does that mean? So we have done more in terms of guest lecturers coming in and, business engagement in working opportunities for placements, for example, but there is more that we can do. And I think that it's a great opportunity to engage in some of that more connected work. So I think whilst we can focus on, ensuring that industry connection is there, we want to hear like what could we do better and how could we design it so that there's more industry relevancy. And that might be in very specific ways, or it could be broader, it could be interconnected across the faculties. So there are so many things that meet interprofessional learning, and it's exciting. So how can we do that across, like a psychology student working with an engineering student or a medic or a geographer? How do we develop projects that are more real world applicable, for example? And in BMH we do an awful lot of work with service learning, which is another thing where it's connecting with that industry. For us, that industry is often healthcare, working with the communities and working more locally so that students have got that experience of applying what they've learned into practice. So I think opportunities like that are so applicable across the university, and it's how do we do that at scale again. But I think this is a good way that higher education trends are shifting to meet the needs of kind of industry and employment, and that's huge in terms of, like we discussed earlier, isn't it?
And I think the same is true in humanities. I mean, traditionally I think theory-based research has been kind of prioritised in humanities disciplines, but with changes in REF, which is the system that evaluates the quality of research, a big part of that now is impact. And so even whether it's working with charities or working with other organisations, lots of people in humanities are working with external bodies as part of their research. So I think the question is about how do we make sure that students are seeing that and getting the benefits from it, rather than necessarily the staff having worked in industry themselves. And of course, industry is a very broad term as well in terms of the kinds of things, in humanities. If you're doing creative writing, you are working with some of the people that are writing books and poetry and on all those kinds of things, but might not be called industry in the traditional sense.
I think,
I was going to say, I think one little area to plug is certainly skills for employability. So I could well imagine you may have an academic who may not be as familiar with what are the skills industry is currently looking for. But so I came from industry into academia, but that's many years ago. No guesses. That's many years ago.
Last year.
Yeah, many years ago. So would I know currently what they want? The only reason I know is through the career service. So even there's a need to draw on this expertise we have of people who really do know what is currently being looked for.
But I think what students really want is an industry experience, like a work experience, and they think that having like a professor coming from industry can help their experience. But coming back to your point that how do we make students aware of what we're doing? Do students know that each professor has an industry partner? Does it help for them to know about that?
It's a good point. Probably I bet we've never said it.
No.
No, good point.
Yeah. And I think we assume that because we know it, that everyone else will know it. And it's like, I think we need to break some of those assumptions down and make sure we're just because nothing's a secret, nothing is, hidden in terms of what we do and why we do it. But we work on assumptions because we go through the cycle each year, and we sometimes, you can sometimes forget that, students are new to this area, whether it be a module or the university. And it's about refreshing some of those conceptions and how we share that with students. So I think that's a really good challenge because I think we can certainly do better in communicating that more transparently.
It's on public websites. Yeah. So all those statements about impact, benefit to society, if you've got an EPSRC grant, it's there on their public website. The irony is we're not using it internally.
So going to the next question, how do you make sure that students get feedback from the assessments on time?
Yeah, so what the three vice deans have done is take a paper to the university executive looking at what the next steps are in trying to improve our scores in NSS. Well, let's be honest, let's improve student experience, an outcome of which is better NSS scores. I like to get it that way around. And one of the items in that paper is we've got this move to campus as our new central learning environment. It gives us an opportunity we never had with Blackboard, which is to automatically track when we give assessments out to students, the dates, and then to track, most importantly, when we give them their marks and when we give them their feedback. At the moment, that's a hugely manual process for our professional services colleagues. You literally have to go into each Blackboard unit and check it. Whereas now with Canvas, we could literally run, if you really wanted to, daily reports and track that students are getting their feedback and marks on the date at the time we said they would. And that, I think, will change things culturally as well, the fact we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that way we can then, okay, Peter's a day late. Someone contacts Peter and says, Peter, why are you a day late getting your feedback to students? And we can then have that discussion.
And we can openly tell students that timeline isn't going to be met. Because I think we've done a lot of engagement with students around, trust and working with us and how we communicate. And I think the biggest thing is if we know it's not going to meet that timeline, even though we're working towards it, we have to explain that and explain why and explain when it will come. So whether it's the following up with the academic who, for X reason, hasn't met that timeline, we need to give you full transparency of when you will get it and when it can be actioned, like you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, and another thing, coming back to your point, Nahid, about what we don't tell students, how do we explain to them that there will be students with additional support needs who may have another week? There may be students with mitigating circumstances. So sometimes they may say, oh, my coursework is a week late. But we've never said to them, well, actually, we give these students an additional week as an automatic extension.
Yep.
There's a lot more then we can do quite elegantly,
Mm-hmm.
so that when students get dates, those are really the dates when they'll get it back.
Yeah.
But Canvas will be the thing that will let us do this,
Mm-hmm.
get away from this manual process.
At the moment in humanities, if somebody is going to be late, they have to apply to the faculty for permission to be late. So they, if there's somebody's ill or something like that, and what we kind of do is look at those on a case by case basis. Some cases say that's not a reason to be late. You should still have to get that work back on time. In some cases, we ask the school to find an alternative marker to do that. I think that the difference with Canvas is the people that aren't actually requesting the permission, and they're the ones, that it's important that we kind of identify and make sure that they're returning their feedback on time.
Very good point.
I guess as well, a lot of students are going to be going into their final exams of the year. So, what would be your advice to students who are about to sit their final exams?
Take absolute every opportunity to engage with revision sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Many of the staff offer these revision sessions, and often are asked, will there be a podcast? And the answer is very often this, the real, but it's not the same as being in the room.
Yeah.
And that's your opportunity to go, could you just clarify that point?
Yeah.
I mean, past papers, and obviously that. But the students that I speak to, my duties, say their key thing is two things. One, don't revise alone. Be with others. Look, because it is a stressful time and thinking of their well-being. So come up with little groups that sort of have agreements about when you're doing revision and when you're not.
Yeah.
And maybe then you go and do a social activity, and then to plan out the revision as well, so that they actually have a little bit of a revision timetable. But their biggest tip to me, and it's a case of it's been a while since I've done exams. The face is getting straighter. I keep throwing that one out. So what I do. But they'd say the biggest trick is to study in groups, so that you're part of a group and just changes the feeling and looks after your well-being.
Yeah.
I think that's a really good tip, actually, studying in groups. I think the other thing is use consultation times. So don't be afraid about knocking on somebody's door and asking them questions if you're not sure about things. In humanities, whereas a lot of our exams are open book exams, attempting to kind of be a little bit more authentic, a bit more real world. The other thing is to still make sure that you're preparing for those exams, because you can't do everything in the kind of open book period. So still do revisions, still make sure you've got summaries of the kind of key articles that you need, and make sure you've got everything in one place, ready to go, so that you can make most effective use of the time that you have during those open book exams.
Yeah. No, and I think I was going to emphasise your point about actually reaching out, because most academics want students to come and say, I'm struggling with this, I don't know where this is, even if it's just, it's in this area in Blackboard, or this is a good reference for you to use. I think don't be afraid to ask those questions, because you'll be really surprised at how receptive people are, and because everybody wants the students to succeed. They want you to enjoy the exam period. I say this, I do love assessment, but it's enjoy that time and have confidence in the fact that you've worked so hard, you know an awful lot of things, you've been in your lectures, your seminars, whatever it might be, and you've been applying that knowledge, you've been working to that in your independent study time. Have confidence in your abilities and what you know, and don't always assume, I have to do it in this way and, I have to do it in the right way. Ask the questions, have the confidence in yourself to, share the information that you've been working so hard on. So whilst it's a short exam, you've been building up and working towards this for months and years in some cases. So don't forget all the work that you've done, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Whatever it might be, whether it's, balancing work and life commitments and ability to revise, whether it's, clarifying some individual materials, be open and ask those questions, because I think staff will be incredibly receptive to students who want to ask those questions.
So I actually have the last question, which is a bit lighter than the rest of them. But what is one thing you're excited for next academic year?
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
BMH on tour growing.
Oh, yeah.
I love this. So the thing that brings the most excitement is that day-to-day interaction with students and, co-designing activities, different bits in the assessment framework that we're doing. I think just engaging more with students. I think Manchester 2035 strategy will be launching very soon, and I think that's a really exciting time for student education and working authentically in partnership together. So I'm excited for that to evolve.
I think the Canvas launch is really exciting as well. I think, there's an opportunity there for us to refresh our course units, to rethink our assessments. So I think that there's some really exciting things that could come out of that, and much more personalised learning. So we're building at the moment to try and make sure that we take advantage of that opportunity.
Oh, that's hard now, isn't it?
Just say what they said.
I often do. Now, definitely Canvas. I mean, just that uniformity, so that when a student lands the landing page of a unit, they know where to find things. It sounds so trivial, but it's such a problem. The other one that's a little bit of a spark of something to come, I think next year we're trialling our first cross-3 faculty projects.
Wow.
So this will be, it's a consequence, I'm afraid, of students meeting and talking. It's shocking. And they've actually, it's a bit like you said, you could imagine a social science student, an engineering student, and a geography student, and even a BMH student.
I know. We love to chat.
You can imagine, you bring them together, they can do something really special that no one individual discipline can do. Now, I think that could get very exciting. My problem with that is going to be scale, because I think it could really take off. And how would we do that at scale? So at the moment, we're doing a little bit of magic about how do you make that fit in with 3 different degree structures and whatever. But I see that as a huge opportunity. So
that's the exciting bit of the challenge, isn't it? Figuring out how do we do
nice
it.
To see.
And let students just design their own projects, come together or organically and figure that out. So I think that's exciting for us to do together. It's good.
We're also piloting some opportunities with students overseas, so students in Melbourne and Toronto, which are strategic partners of the university, and see whether or not we can get some projects up and running in that sort of a way as well, in a project around global classrooms. So that's an exciting opportunity too.
Yeah.
But again, the question of scale is a big one.
Yeah.
We can do it.
It's a nice question to end on, though, because I think we do spend a lot of time solving problems collectively as a group. And it is nice, a bit like we're saying about study groups and revision. It's nice for us as a group just to pause and actually go, that is a really nice thing we're going to be doing.
Yeah. Bit of optimism.
Yeah, what a positive note to end on. Well, thank you so much to the panel. It's been really, really interesting hearing what you have to say, and I'm sure a lot of students will appreciate what you've said today. And thank you to all the students who submitted questions as well.
Thank you.
We'll be continuing this podcast series, so please look out on university or student union channels for any communication. But yeah, have a good exam season, I guess.
Good luck to everyone.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thanks.